Well, I'd like to thank Joe and Charles for inviting me. Those guys, they know how to be organized and put stuff like this on. So I was very excited when they came to me and said, hey, we were doing a conference. I jumped at the opportunity to participate. So today I'm sharing some thoughts and observations from my last 10 plus years shipping independent Mac and iOS software. Now, before I fill the room with hot air, I figured it's only fair that you guys know a bit more about me. I started Super Mega Ultra Groovy back in 1999, but I only started shipping Mac software in 2004. I left my job in early 2008 to do this independently, and so far I haven't bankrupted my family, so success. Now, Super Mega Ultra Groovy has two major products. The first is FuzzMeasure, which is an audio and acoustic measurement application for the Mac. It's used in various industries. You could use it to tune a home theater, set up a PA system, design an acoustic hall like this. In 2006, I won a design award in the scientific computing category, back when they had categories, for FuzzMeasure. And Capo is the one you're more likely to have heard of. It's a tool for musicians who learn music by ear, and it ships for both Mac and iOS. It uses sophisticated math and science to detect chords, helps you tab things out, displays a sophisticated spectrogram, slows down without affecting pitch. It does a whole lot more, but I only have so much time here. In 2011, Capo also won an Apple Design Award in the Mac Showcase. So let's get this party started. FuzzMeasure and Capo are two very different applications that serve very different markets. But where do product ideas like this come from? And how do you find them? You just have to be lucky. But what does that mean? Well, I'd like to share a quote from Richard Wiseman. Unlucky people miss chance opportunities because they're too focused on looking for something else. They go to parties intent on finding their perfect partner, and so miss opportunities to find new friends. They look through a newspaper for specific job advertisements and miss out on different types of jobs. Lucky people are more relaxed and open, and therefore see what is there rather than what they are looking for. I believe that by seeking out a product, like actively searching for one, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. Good ideas are out there, but I feel that truly good products kind of fall on your lap, but you have to be ready for them. Now, I can't speak about luck without bringing up this quote. I had been interested and excited about music and technology since I started with computers. I never had day jobs in this field. I just kind of tinkered around with it in my spare time. It's as if I was passively preparing for something, but I wasn't really sure what. I was just noodling around and having fun, really. So where did FuzzMeasure come from? Well, at the time, I was building a set of speakers for my home theater. I was house poor at the time, and along the process of building these speakers, I realized, hey, there's no software for me to measure my speakers on the Mac. There was a bunch of stuff for the PC, but it was really expensive and had terrible UIs. Well, I kind of want to develop software for the Mac, and I'm interested in signal processing, so maybe there's something here for me. Now, I wasn't really itching to start a Mac software company. I had a good job. I had just gotten married, and I just bought a new home. I wasn't flush with free time. But by being open to this idea of building software for the Mac, and having this hobby as well on the side, I felt like it was the perfect opportunity for me. Now, Capo was sort of similar. I knew after FuzzMeasure that I wanted to do something a little bit more musical, but I was short on ideas at the time. In a past life, I did a lot with music production. And in 2007, I wanted to get back into music, so I bought myself a guitar. But a year after that, in 2008, I started taking guitar lessons. And in the first lesson, my teacher urged me to learn songs by ear. So I tried to find something to help me with that. And there were products, but they kind of sucked. So I thought, hey, this is a ripe opportunity here. I should jump on this. I want to build something to do this. It was almost exactly the same as FuzzMeasure. But there's sort of a different lesson here with Capo. I pushed myself to do something totally new. I became a member of a different market. So that allowed me to discover totally different opportunities. Now, if we think back to that quote about being lucky and being at the party, you're going to have an easier time finding friends if you're attending more parties. Now, what I mean by that is by exposing yourself to these different hobbies and new things, you're going to extend yourself. You're going to find different situations that you could solve different problems. All these ideas are just going to come flying at you. Now, if you write software for a guitar and suddenly you were to take up the drums, I guarantee you're going to suddenly get a flood of new product ideas. So let's say we get this tap of ideas just flowing. Which ones do you work on? How do we filter them? Which one's going to be worth your time to build or create a business out of? So I think that an important filter is determining what market you want to target. Which people are going to pay for your ideas? Your business lives and dies by your customers. So you need to choose them wisely. Know what else they buy. Understand how your solution fits into their life. Figure out what problems that these people need solved. Now, generally, I think in terms of two very distinct markets. Mobile apps are now part of popular culture. Developers get excited by the mass market because millions of customers are there at our fingertips. But unfortunately for most businesses, these customers don't really think or behave very rationally. So consider this. Like a cup of coffee, if your product is a luxury or a status symbol or purely for entertainment, you should expect to work just as hard as those industries to influence and attract customers. Big advertising budgets, celebrity endorsements, etc. There's a huge potential upside here, don't get me wrong. But if you think that it's easy to influence popular culture, you've got another thing coming. So if you find yourself forced to think in these terms and explain the value of your product to your customers in comparison to a cup of coffee, then you might have a weak value proposition on your hands. And it's really expensive to overcome that. So what alternative is there? Well, niche or vertical markets are the winning choice, in my opinion. It might not be sexy from a fame or notoriety point of view, but there's certainly an upside where it counts. You have a solid revenue stream. Also, niche markets are typically underserved by software. I mean, if you could think back to times that you've interacted with professionals using software, maybe you've seen a dentist or a lawyer or a real estate agent working with software that just looks terrible, and you were just cringing as this person's working with this user interface. Well, I bet you'd cringe more when you found out what they probably paid for that solution. That's because this market thinks and behaves very differently than the masses. See, there's a much clearer value proposition when they are looking at your software. Maybe they're thinking in terms of their hourly rate, how much time they're saving. Maybe they're comparing against hiring a developer to build them an entirely custom solution. And if you built an off-the-shelf product to do that, you could win that comparison hands down. Now, I think there's a lot of very talented product developers out there, and they're wasting their effort building toys and not tools. We're failing the professionals of the world if we continue like this. For example, my optometrist, I go to her office and she's got a Mac Mini there running Parallels and 2 different pieces of Windows software that are appearing sort of natively on the Mac desktop. Like, it's just a hot mess of UI. And if you think about it, she had to pay somebody to set that up for her. And then she'll have to pay somebody to maintain that nasty thing. These industries throw money at stuff like this, and they still end up with a really awkward solution. Now, should you be so lucky to sell to professionals, you'll notice that it's a very different experience. I like to think of this as best case contracting. I have a very collaborative relationship with my customers. They're constantly feeding me feedback. But unlike a traditional contract, I can pick and choose which of that feedback to work on. An added benefit of this is that they're telling me exactly what they need, and by implementing more, I'm attracting even more customers. Sort of a win-win situation. But speaking of making it attractive, I'd like to talk a little bit about pricing. Now, pricing is something that could fill an entire course of talks. But I'm just going to try and share a few insights. A few minutes. I can't tell you how to price your product, but if you're a member of the market, it's going to be a lot easier for you. Dollar might be the right answer, but you have to understand that the question is, what is the value of your product to the user? Your price sends a very strong message, and you need to try and get this right. So let's do a little thought exercise together. I'm going to adapt an old example from one of my favorite articles on pricing by Eric Sink. It's called the Product Pricing Primer. Imagine using the magic of software, you could teleport somebody anywhere in the world in a split second. How much would you charge for that? Is that a premium $5 app? Maybe 10 bucks. Let's go crazy. Well, compare that with the cost of you getting here to release notes. The hassle, the cost, everything. Are you sure it's worth only 10 bucks? I should hope not. In the case of teleport, you're still faced with a bit of a dilemma here. A lawyer that makes 400 bucks an hour is going to value your product very differently than somebody in college. If there are ways to segment your market through pricing, then you should definitely go down that path. For example, FuzzMeasure 4 just shipped recently with 2 major pricing tiers. We have a commercial license, which is $500 for the first year and $200 each subsequent year. You get all the major upgrades included in that, and you get really good support. In contrast, you have the personal license, which is for hobbyists. That's $100 for each major release. It's going to be a separate purchase each time, and there's no guarantee of support. We're still nice people, but. Now it's too expensive, some people are going to say. We as developers, we get up in arms every time somebody brings this up. I mean, after all, these people are basically saying that our life's work is worthless. But these people are not your customers. Seriously, you can ignore them. If you're fortunate to have any sales at all, and you see these notes out there, your marketing's just hitting more people than is really necessary. Ultimately, there's just extra people who are finding out about your product, and they really just not for them. Customers really just vote with their dollars. You should be listening to feedback about your product rather than feedback about your pricing. Now, I've had users complain when version 4 launched. I have to pay another $100 for this? I mean, I don't really launch it that often. I just use it once in a while. Do these people not read their emails? They don't need the product. So why don't I just make it cheaper for these people? Well, that's the root of all evil in this race to the bottom in pricing. It's a desire to just take their money anyway. So instead, I'd recommend building a limited set of functionality in a lower price point, if you can manage that. It could serve 2 purposes. One, it could be a marketing vehicle to get people to your bigger solution and just attract new users, which could spread word of mouth. And then it gives casual users a lower price point. So sort of a win-win. And it doesn't erode the value of your core product. Now you could argue that Capo Touch could stand alone as a product. And it does to some extent. But in reality, it's a powerful marketing vehicle for us. It drives sales and awareness to the full-featured Mac product. But it also does something in reverse. It gives our Mac users a value add by giving them basically another feature, a mobile add-on, if you will. So it can be a very useful sales tool. Now, I'm going to close this section with one last thought. This race to the bottom needs participants in order to continue. Top charts in the App Store seem like a very attractive target. Put all your effort into getting there. But your position there is fleeting. And I think you should instead view it as a reward rather than the goal. Something neat that you could brag about with your buddies or send press releases about and stuff. When you choose not to run in the race to the bottom, you're participating in a totally different sport altogether. And it requires a very different approach to pricing, like what I sort of described earlier. That was pricing. Now I want to talk a little bit about money. I've experienced my business running both rich and lean. And just like a gas combustion engine, neither of those situations are really ideal. If we go by textbooks, business finance and personal finance are very different. We don't sell orange juice concentrate, or we don't make orange juice from concentrate, we don't stock shelves, we don't have shipping costs. So because we build software, we shouldn't have to work on credit generally. Instead, we can work slowly to bootstrap our business on a cash basis. This won't work for all software companies, as demonstrated earlier today, but I think it's the most sustainable and accessible model. And you're most likely to come out of it with a roof still over your head and some valuable experience to, pick up another job. Now, when you're running a business, your revenue keeps you breathing and alive. Unfortunately, your business exists in a hostile environment. So it's important to stay aware of the times when, important to stay aware of your consumption at all times. Know when it's okay to hold your breath and how long you can hold your breath. What do I mean by that? Well, launches, promotions, and anything else that's going to cause a short-term spike in your sales, they're great. This is the rich time I'm talking about. But unless you have a strong business background or you're really conservative with your own finances, you're likely to screw this up. I mean, seriously. Suddenly you're rich. You won. But there are cautionary tales about lottery winners for a reason. So hold off on that down payment on your private island. Don't hire a bunch of personal assistants, personal baristas, chefs. Sometimes it's a good thing that the App Store takes about a month and a half to get you your money for these big sales. You get a built-in period of sort of sleeping on it before you make any rash decisions. Now, Rob talked about this earlier, but business expenses do creep upwards. And once they go up, it's very difficult to bring them back down again. For example, you might have adjusted to having help with employees, so it's going to be very difficult for you to adjust again to what it's like to not have that help anymore. Similarly, if you build a backend that requires expensive custom servers to run, going back to a VPS environment might be a bit of an engineering time suck to do. So, once that expense goes up, it's hard to go back. So be careful that when you make these decisions, you can afford them for a while. So if you are so lucky to experience one of these bursts of sales, then stash the cash. Maybe put it in a rainy day fund, bury it in the yard, whatever you do. But it's really hard to take this advice when you're in it. I promise. It's helpful to think of these launches and sales sort of like playing a racing game in the arcade. You reached a checkpoint. You can do this a little bit longer. You get more time on your clock, so to speak. So if you figure out how many more months you have at the current level, given this new blob of cash you just got, then you can mess with your burn rate. But be aware of how many months of safety that you're giving up at each one of these points. Now, investors are told to diversify different funds to avoid bumps and dips in the market. Now, in software, our products are our investments, and it pays to diversify. When sales of one product are up, you're supporting the development of the others. When sales of both products are up, things are fantastic. When sales of both products are down, man, it would suck to have just one. So, if you want to diversify, you want to play to your strengths. Use shared components or technology that can be reused between your different products. For instance, I'm not going to start making game engines and building stuff down that path. I'm not going to go down to medical imaging. It just would be way too expensive to get into an entirely different market. But I'm also going to lose out on the benefit of marketing to my existing customers to some extent. There's a lot of power there. You've got a captive audience, you might as well use them. And if you're an iOS-only developer, you really need to strongly consider entering the Mac market, especially if you build anything in the productivity world. You're crazy not to consider it because the price points are generally higher. Your revenue potential is way higher. The example I have is that Capo for iOS, in its best month ever, with front page featuring and the whole 9 yards, still only made about a quarter of the equivalent on the Mac. It's a very low-hanging fruit, and it's something I highly recommend that you take advantage of. That was money. Now, connections in business, they're not dirty, they're not evil, they're not cheating. It just doesn't come naturally to us engineering types. So something feels unfair about it for some reason. Now, if this is a problem for you, you need to get over it. Because running a business requires you to draw on these connections regularly. As Mac and iOS developers, we have an excellent community. We're very welcoming to new members in the group, and you should do whatever you can to build connections if you're new to the group. Sometimes that comes through beta testing products, sometimes reaching out over Twitter or email. Back in 2004, I sent an email to Gus Mueller of Flying Meat asking about payment processors, and we still keep in touch to this day. Now, if you have meetups in your city, you really should be attending them. They don't have to be Mac and iOS. They could be just, related to your market somehow. But this is going to help you find like-minded individuals that have very different perspectives. That could be helpful. It could also help you find potential employees in the future if you should expand. Now, trade shows are a very tricky subject because they're very expensive and time-consuming. Also, trade shows are not built for small businesses at all. It's a lot to take on. But if you want to enter a niche market, this is your opportunity to find your press that you want to target, your customers. It's also the only time you're probably going to see so many of them in one place at the same time. So you really want to research and consider this type of thing. Also, if there are products that are complementary to your own, it's a good idea to befriend the other developers. Try helping sell their product, and they might help sell yours. Maybe you guys have some technology that you can license to each other and, boost both of your sales up that way. Now, this is a totally different type of partnership. Apple isn't always able or willing to help. Sometimes it's an issue of scale. Sometimes it's a misalignment of what's on their mind at any given time. But I don't recommend that you give up trying to contact them. Whenever it makes sense, reach out to the evangelists, let them know, what's working for you, what's not working for you. You have to stay on their radar, so to speak, so that they know you exist, because otherwise you don't. And if you've gone to WWDC, I really hope that you've gone to the App Store lab. This is the place where you get to demonstrate that you have your act together. Arrange a meeting with somebody on the store marketing team and lay out your marketing plan. Let them know about your launch. Show them what ads you plan on placing and what type of other things you're doing to launch your product. You're going to have a much better chance of getting them to stick you on their calendar for building a list of related apps for their feature list. It's not all just about the front page. They have a lot of purpose-oriented lists that they're constantly trying to build. So this is highly valuable. Now, part of a solid marketing plan is communicating with the press. But if you see a really great review come out, you really should reach out to those reviewers and be thankful for what they've done. Be grateful. Keep in touch with that writer because you never know. They might need you for something else down the road. Maybe they're doing a roundup of guitar apps, and who are they going to think to email? Well, the people they've already communicated with in the past, of course. Maybe they need some insights for an editorial article or something along those lines. But all these little things can help increase your visibility overall. But there's a fine line between spamming the press and communicating with them. They want to see your interesting and notable news, but not too much. You really need to use good judgment here. And if they don't cover your launches, you really shouldn't be trying to say, hey, where's that article about that thing I did? You can really easily turn somebody off by being very needy about this stuff. I've also heard some really cringeworthy stories, so don't let me hear about any of you. So that was connections. Now I'm going to close with something a little bit softer, protecting your sanity. Now this is a very rough business to participate in. And at times it could take a toll on your mental health. And I think that it's important to put some effort into maintaining your sanity and your positive state of mind. Now, if you're a knowledge worker, then you effectively sit for a living. You need to make time for exercise and stick with a long-term plan. I personally recommend strength training because you get to practice setting and working towards goals. You get used to exerting a big effort to make tiny incremental changes over time. In our industry, the work that we do, we get attracted to making tiny efforts to make big change. So it's easy to forget that sometimes a lot of really unpleasant work is required regularly to help you avoid unpleasantness down the road. Now, speaking of goals, you should always be planning. Know what you're doing today, this week, this month, and beyond. Plans are always going to change. Plans often go out of date quickly, but not planning at all is going to ultimately kill you. And not only do our plans change all the time, but we're not always in control of those changes. Apple moves to the beat of their own drum, and that beat's just getting faster and faster and faster every year. Now, failing to keep up with that beat isn't going to kill you. In fact, if you're targeting niche markets, some of these people are actively avoiding upgrading their devices and OSs. So don't really sweat that much if you're not able to keep pace with all this craziness going on. It's really a tough problem to solve, and I mean, if you talk to anyone else in this room, everyone's feeling the crunch with this lately. Now, if you're anything like me, you get really excited when Apple introduces something new and shiny. New platforms, new features, new languages. But Apple has a huge marketing machine that's targeted at us to help them sell their products. Now, when I first built my products, I built them with a vision that would take years or even decades to execute. So it's important that you avoid selling Apple's products and technologies at the expense of your own. Keep pushing forward on the things that you set out to do from the beginning, and then find time for the new and shiny stuff. Now, what would you do if you retired? Are you going to take up fishing? Maybe restore an old Camaro? Travel more? I'm not saying to sit around and watch The Price is Right every day, but just consider exploring these interests now rather than waiting until someday in the future. It's very important as knowledge workers that we take regular mental breaks. We need as many tools as possible to escape stress and other realities of this business. And hobbies are kind of one of the best ways to do that. So the other thing I would say about that is many hobbies take years of practice to get good at them, to feel competent, kind of like what Georgia was talking about, to sort of achieve flow. The better you are at doing something, the more you're going to enjoy it. So you might as well start now to avoid frustration down the line. Now, when you get going in this business, you've got sales, you're moving forward, you can get a quick sense of what your time is worth. A quick calculation can yield an approximate hourly rate, what your time is worth. That concrete number is valuable because you can think in terms of this number. If you find it hard to say no to certain wasteful projects or emails or hats, just because you want to be polite. I'm Canadian, I want to be polite. I want to say yes to everything. Well, once you have that number in mind, it's a lot easier to turn on Do Not Disturb mode or move to a different computer or turn off the internet because you realize just how much money is being lost by not doing what you should be doing. Now, it's easy to get distracted by reports of other people's revenues and sort of wonder, why am I not making that kind of money? What am I screwing up? What am I doing wrong? But I would say that comparing your revenues, your feature spots, what they have and what I have, that's going to be unproductive and ultimately unhealthy. It's tough to ignore the news every time an indie hits it big. And, maybe they've got $1 million month or something that sounds really exciting. But just as easy as that money comes, I've been doing this long enough to know that money can disappear just as easily. There are very few stories of companies that have been doing this for decades and supporting an entire workforce. That's because this is slow and hard work. Generally, they're too busy to talk about it too. Now I'm going to close with a thought that I think is very important to us as independent developers. What does success look like to you? Is it a certain amount of revenue? A valuable piece of commercial real estate maybe? Particular employee headcount? For me, I wouldn't trade an 8-figure business bank account for my healthy family, my flexibility in the work that I do, and this unending stream of challenges that I'll have for years to come. So for me, I've already found my success, but I'm still going to do whatever it takes to maintain that. And that's it. Thanks for your time.